Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're exploring a really profoundly insightful guide for healing. It's one that addresses those, well, often invisible scars left by long-term emotional damage.
Yeah.
We're diving deep into Tamara McClintock Greenberg's powerful manual, The Courage to Start Anew, a healing manual for survivors of complex trauma.
And this book, it's just absolutely vital right now. It gives language and, crucially, validation to a struggle that, well, for many years just went unacknowledged.
Right.
Worse, was actively misinterpreted.
Right.
We're focusing on complex post-traumatic stress disorder, CPTSD.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important, I think, to understand the difference straight away.
Right.
Classic PTSD is usually rooted in a single life-threatening event. Think combat, a major accident. But CPTSD, that arises from the accumulation of prolonged, often interpersonal relational trauma.
Like childhood abuse, neglect.
Exactly, or chronic betrayal. Living in constantly unsafe environments. It's trauma that happens over time, often within relationships.
And that history, that cumulative aspect, is why getting the understanding right is so critical. The sources we looked at really highlight that for decades, individuals showing CPTSD symptoms were often, well, mislabeled.
Mm-hmm. Frequently receiving diagnoses like borderline personality disorder, BPD.
Mm-hmm.
And what's so destructive about that kind of misdiagnosis
Yeah.
is that it frames the trauma responses,
Mm.
the intense emotional ups and downs, the relationship struggles. It frames them as inherent, unchangeable personality flaws, like something's fundamentally wrong with you.
Instead of a response to something.
Precisely. This book fundamentally shifts that view. It offers immense validation. It recognizes these intense reactions not as like a disorder of character, but actually as a testament to astonishing psychological resilience.
Resilience, that's a powerful reframe.
It is. These were necessary, often brilliant survival mechanisms that a child or anyone in the situation had to develop just to get through a toxic environment.
It truly changes the internal narrative, doesn't it, from what is wrong with me to, okay, what happened to this?
That's the core shift.
So our mission today really is to unpack the core wound the book identifies, look at the path back to reclaiming the self, and importantly, equip you, the listener, with some actionable tools based on the book's framework of the 4As.
Acceptance, awareness, authenticity, and action.
Yeah.
That framework is kind of the map back. But first, we really need to understand the foundational injury, the starting point.
Okay, let's get into that. The core concept of identity theft. This is the powerful metaphor the manual uses to describe the CPTSD experience.
Such a striking term.
It really is. The idea is that early and repeated trauma essentially steals a critical part of the survivor's, well, essential self-awareness. You maybe never got the chance to develop a strong, clear sense of your own thoughts, your own feelings, your needs, your wants.
And if you don't know who you are, the practical consequence of that is just intense, relentless self-blame.
Right.
The external world feels chaotic, unpredictable, maybe dangerous. So the internal answer becomes, it must be me. I must be the problem.
So you internalize being difficult or moody or fundamentally flawed.
Yeah, exactly. Simply because your natural responses are out of sync with what the environment demanded, or maybe what seems normal now.
But, okay, if a survivor's internal sense of self feels like it's been stolen or is just blank, doesn't telling them to look inward feel like another impossible task, another way to fail? How does the manual address that feeling of emptiness?
That's a really crucial point. And the book reframes it. It suggests thinking of the self almost like a detective, gathering clues.
Okay.
Because, as the sources emphasize, the survivor often spent their early life hyper-focused on what others wanted or needed, just to stay safe, constantly reading the room, analyzing external threats.
Survival mode.
Total survival mode. So the first step isn't about suddenly feeling whole or knowing exactly who you are. It's about recognizing that those intense symptoms, the anxiety, the avoidance, the anger, they aren't flaws. They're just data points.
Data points. I like that.
Yeah. They're information. They signal that a historical trigger has been pulled or an important need isn't being met. Trauma strips away the chance to be authentic, right? So healing has to begin with this kind of curious, non-judgmental observation of the data.
Okay, so if identity theft is the core wound, the book offers a pathway back, and that involves a concept called mentalization.
Yes, and look, I know that sounds a bit academic, maybe jargony,
A little bit.
but it's actually incredibly practical when you break it down. Mentalization, sometimes you hear it as thinking about thinking. It's basically the imaginative mental activity that lets us perceive and interpret our own desires, feelings, beliefs, and also try to understand others.
Oh, understanding your own inner world and understanding that others have their own inner worlds too.
Exactly. And the ultimate goal of cultivating this capacity is authenticity, being real, being able to say, this is what I think, this is what I feel, and knowing it's separate from what someone else might think or feel.
That shift sounds monumental because if you spent your whole childhood needing to be like a professional tracker of external cues,
Right.
reading the slightest shift in a parent's mood just to survive the next 10 minutes, you'd become an expert on everyone but yourself.
Spot on. CPTSD survivors often get trapped in the state of overvigilance, constantly scanning the external world for danger signals. It was a vital survival skill.
Had to be.
Absolutely. Mentalization requires flipping that intense, brilliant survival skill inward. It demands turning that curiosity, that intense focus, away from just external threats and toward your own internal processes.
So prioritizing understanding yourself first, not just defining your reality and your worth based on constant external surveillance.
That's the heart of it.
I can imagine that transition, though, from external surveillance to internal curiosity. It must feel almost impossible sometimes, maybe even threatening, because that vigilance was safety for so long.
It absolutely is threatening. It feels dangerous to stop scanning. And that threat, that fear, it often surfaces most violently in relationships. And frequently, it's disguised as anger.
Oh.
In the sources we looked at, anger is often described as a secondary emotion in these contexts. It's rarely the root feeling.
Secondary, because it feels stronger, maybe, more protective.
Exactly that. Anger is the fight part of the fight, flight, freeze response, right? It often serves as this powerful, sometimes more outwardly acceptable expression of underlying fear and vulnerability.
Fear feels helpless, maybe, but anger feels potent.
Precisely. Fear feels like weakness, exposure. Anger feels like strength, like control, even if it's destructive control. When your nervous system is already highly sensitized from past trauma, it can default really quickly to the strongest protective mechanism available, and often that's anger.
Can you give us a sort of concrete example how this might play out in an everyday dynamic, maybe between partners?
Sure. Let's say a survivor's partner comes home and seems distant or withdrawn, maybe just stressed from work, totally unrelated to the survivor.
Okay.
But for the survivor, that distant behavior immediately triggers a profound historical fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of disapproval based on past experiences.
Old pattern kicks in.
Instantly. But instead of feeling the vulnerability and the raw pain of that fear, which might feel just too overwhelming, too dangerous to the survivor, might immediately react with aggression or hostility.
How so?
Maybe initiating a fight over something small, insignificant, or making accusations. They deploy anger, in a way, to preemptively manage the perceived threat of separation or rejection. It's like pushing someone away before they can push you away.
Wow. And the book offers a strategy to interrupt that cycle, which I found incredibly useful. It's called The Strategy of Not Being the One Holding the Gun.
Such a grounding metaphor, isn't it?
It really is. Explain that a bit.
Well, the idea is when you react with that aggressive anger, you immediately switch roles in the narrative. You become the aggressor, the one holding the gun.
And that probably confirms the negative internal belief, right? That you are difficult, you are the problem.
Exactly, which then piles on guilt and shame later, creating this vicious cycle. So the goal is to manage the internal fear and the rising anger before you externalize it in an attacking way.
So this is mentalization in action then?
Yes.
Yeah.
This is where it gets practical. First, the book suggests you have to acknowledge the fear internally. Maybe literally say to yourself, okay, I feel really afraid right now that this distance means they're leaving me or they're angry with me.
Name the fear.
Name the fear. Step one. Second, you consciously choose a measured, non-attacking response. So instead of demanding reassurance or starting a fight,
Which is the impulse.
which is absolutely impulse, you might instead create space and set a boundary. Something like, you seem upset. I'm going to give you some space for a bit, but I am available to talk later if you want to.
That non-reactive boundary, that feels like the key. It stops the escalation.
It stops the escalation and it preserves your own emotional integrity. You didn't become the aggressor. You manage the internal storm without causing external damage. And that, right there, connects directly to the actionable framework the manual provides, the 4A's.
Ah, okay. So this is how you take the theory, the ideas like identity theft and mentalization, and actually apply them to daily life.
Exactly. It provides the structure for the healing process.
Okay, let's walk through them because this sounds like the practical toolkit. We start with acceptance. What does the book mean by acceptance in the context of trauma? It's not condoning, right?
Absolutely not. Acceptance isn't approval. It's not saying the trauma was okay. It's simply acknowledging, maybe for the first time, that the emotional wound exists,
Yeah.
that it's real,
And the symptoms, too.
and that the symptoms you experience, the anxiety, the distrust, the anger, are understandable, even rational consequences of surviving an irrational or unsafe environment. Acceptance means dropping the internal war against your own past reality and your present experience, just acknowledging this is here.
Okay, that makes sense. Next up is awareness. This sounds like where mentalization really lands day to day.
That's right. Awareness is the ongoing practice of observation. It's cultivating that internal detective we talked about.
So instead of automatically reacting to, say, anger.
Awareness means trying to track the actual feeling underneath it. Is it fear? Is it shame? Is there an unmet need screaming for attention? It's about identifying those data points we mentioned.
So internally reframing, okay, I'm not failing right now. I'm experiencing chronic anxiety because a historical trigger just got struck.
Precisely. It's noticing without judgment, just gathering the information about your internal state.
Which leads directly to authenticity. If I'm now more aware of my real feeling or need, how does the book guide me towards acting authentically?
Authenticity means starting to act based on your own core needs and values, not just mirroring others or constantly anticipating what others want from you to feel safe.
Moving beyond just survival responses.
Yeah. It means moving from a life lived purely for survival, which was necessary then, to a life lived more intentionally now. So if awareness tells you that you're utterly exhausted,
Mm-hmm.
authenticity might mean saying, I need to rest, even if other people expect you to push through or perform. It's honoring your internal reality.
Okay. And the final A, the cornerstone of actually making change happen, is action.
Right. And action here is really about taking small, manageable, present-focused steps.
Mm.
This is so crucial because CPTSD recovery isn't usually about one grand gesture or sudden cure.
It's incremental.
It's about daily, small changes that slowly reinforce your sense of self, your safety, your agency. For instance, actually using one of those grounding techniques we'll talk about, or setting that small boundary in a conversation we just discussed, or even just taking 5 minutes to consciously check in with your own emotional state.
Mm.
Small, consistent actions.
Okay, and speaking of action, let's talk about a really common symptom many survivors face, which is dissociation. That feeling of being disconnected, right, from your body, your thoughts, maybe the world around you.
Yeah, like you're watching yourself from a distance, or things don't feel quite real. It's the mind's way of disconnecting from something that feels overwhelming, whether that's an external situation or an internal feeling.
A kind of emergency escape hatch.
A very clever one, evolutionarily speaking, but it can be distressing and impairing in daily life. So the manual strongly emphasizes grounding techniques to counter dissociation.
And these are part of the Action A.
Definitely. These techniques are designed specifically to pull your mind back to the present physical reality, to get you back in your body here and now.
And the advice is often very tangible, very sensory, isn't it?
Yes, things like focusing intently on the feeling of coldness from an ice pack in your hand, or concentrating on an intense smell like peppermint oil or coffee grounds.
Or even just engaging in detailed, minute observation of something external. Like really looking at a plant and counting its leaves, noticing the veins.
Exactly. Anything that shifts your focus sharply away from the racing, maybe catastrophic internal thoughts or that floaty, unreal feeling.
And back to the safe, neutral reality of your body and the immediate environment.
Right. It helps shift the nervous system out of that high alert, disconnected state and back into a more regulated, present state. And that then paves the way for more mentalization, more awareness. You can't really be aware if you're completely checked out.
So the healing journey, ultimately, it sounds like it's about dismantling that identity theft piece by piece, using those 4 A's: acceptance, awareness, authenticity, action.
That's the process.
And it involves recognizing that your intense symptoms, they're not proof that you're inherently flawed or unworthy. They're data points. They're guides pointing you toward an unmet need or an old wound that needs tending.
And critically, I think this is so important that sources really emphasize that the solution isn't necessarily about forcing yourself to relive every single traumatic memory in detail. For CPTSD survivors especially, that can be overwhelming, even re-traumatizing.
Right.
The most profound healing often comes from focusing on regulating the present symptoms, learning to manage the anxiety, the anger, the dissociation now so you can live a more authentic life today. That is the path of reclaiming the self that was disrupted.
That focus on present regulation and building resilience, It really brings us to the ultimate message of this manual, doesn't it? It reminds you, the listener, of the profound strength it takes not just to survive experiences like these, but to actually find the courage to heal, to thrive, and to reclaim the life and the self that felt stolen.
Absolutely. And, there's really no better way to conclude this deep dive, I think, than with a powerful quote from the Welsh poet George Herbert. The manual shares it, and it just perfectly captures that sense of ultimate victory over suffering and the courage needed to start anew.
What is it?
Living well is the best revenge.
Wow. Living well is the best revenge. That says it all, really. You have the strength, the resilience, and now, hopefully, a bit more of a framework to begin or continue that journey.
It's a deep dive, truly worth taking. Thank you for joining us today.